Now listen to me. Let me tell you something about men that most people don't understand. When a man truly loves you, it doesn't always look smooth, clear, or romantic the way movies show it. Sometimes it looks confusing. Sometimes it looks like mixed signals. Sometimes it makes you sit there asking yourself, if he loves me, why is he acting like this? And that's because real love doesn't just touch a man's heart, it shakes his whole world. Let me explain something real simple, because this is where a lot of people get it wrong. Love does not always walk into your life organized, calm, and clearly labeled. Sometimes love walks in messy. Sometimes love comes with questions. Sometimes love makes you sit in your room at night staring at your phone, replaying conversations, wondering why someone who clearly cares about you doesn't always act the way you expect. And that's because real love doesn't just make a man happy, it makes him uncomfortable with who he used to be. When a man truly loves you, it doesn't just touch his emotions, it challenges his identity. It forces him to look at his habits, his priorities, his fears, and his future. And when a man hasn't fully figured himself out, love doesn't come out smooth. It comes out complicated. He feels deeply, but he doesn't always know how to express those feelings in a clean, confident way. So what you see on the outside looks like confusion, while on the inside, it's actually pressure. See, loud love is easy. Anybody can text you all day when it doesn't mean anything. Anybody can say sweet words when there's no responsibility attached. But when a man realizes that loving you means consistency, effort, and growth, that's when things shift. That's when he slows down. That's when he starts thinking more than talking. And that's when you start feeling confused. He may go quiet, not because he doesn't care, but because he cares enough to think before he speaks. He may pull back, not because he wants distance, but because he's trying to understand how close he's willing to let himself get. Love makes a man aware of what he could lose, and that awareness can be overwhelming. So instead of rushing forward, he hesitates. Instead of being loud, he becomes careful. A man who doesn't love you won't confuse you like this. He'll be careless with your feelings. He'll do what's convenient for him. He won't think twice about disappearing. But a man who truly loves you feels the weight of your presence in his life. He feels the responsibility of showing up the right way. And when he's not sure he's ready for that responsibility, his actions can feel inconsistent. This is where people misunderstand men the most. Men are taught to be confident, decisive, and in control. Love threatens that image. Love puts him in a position where he doesn't have all the answers. Loving you means admitting vulnerability, and vulnerability doesn't come naturally to most men. So when those emotions rise, confusion follows. He might want you close one moment and need space the next. He might be warm today and quiet tomorrow. Not because his feelings changed, but because he's trying to manage emotions he was never taught how to process. Inside his mind, he's asking himself if he's enough, if he can handle commitment, if he can meet your expectations without losing himself. And while you're trying to understand his behavior, he's trying to understand his emotions. That's why love at this stage doesn't look romantic. It looks human. It looks imperfect. It looks like someone learning how to love properly instead of pretending. The mistake people make is thinking confusion means lack of love. Sometimes confusion means the love is real, heavy, and demanding growth. It means he feels something worth protecting, something worth thinking about, something that could change his life if he handles it wrong. So when his love isn't loud, when it isn't perfectly clear, when it makes you question instead of relax, understand this: real love doesn't always arrive polished. Sometimes it arrives as pressure, hesitation, and deep emotional conflict, because love isn't just a feeling. Love is a transformation. Let me tell you something most people don't say out loud. When a man truly loves you, his emotions don't line up neatly in a straight row. They collide. Desire runs into fear. Wanting you runs into the pressure of keeping you. And that collision creates confusion, not because his love is weak, but because it's powerful enough to force him to slow down and think. A man who doesn't love you moves freely. A man who loves you moves carefully. When real love shows up, it brings responsibility with it. Loving you isn't just about feelings anymore. It's about consistency, effort, and direction. And that's where many men get caught off guard. He may know how to like you, how to want you, how to miss you, but loving you in a way that's stable and lasting requires emotional maturity. When he realizes that his behavior can start to shift in ways that feel confusing to you, you might notice him becoming quieter, more thoughtful, less impulsive. He may not react the way he used to. That doesn't mean the feelings faded. It means the weight increased. Love makes a man aware that his actions matter now. What he says matters. How he shows up matters. And when he's not sure he can do it perfectly, he hesitates instead of pretending. A man who doesn't care will promise you the world without thinking. He'll talk big because there's no real cost. But a man who truly loves you understands that words create expectations. So instead of talking, he watches. Instead of rushing, he measures. That restraint can look like emotional distance when it's actually emotional awareness. Here's the part that really confuses people. When a man loves you deeply, he becomes aware of what he could lose. That awareness creates fear. Not fear of commitment, but fear of failure, fear of disappointing you, fear of not being enough. And fear has a strange way of making people inconsistent. One day he's warm because the love feels good. The next day he's quiet because the responsibility feels heavy. Men aren't taught how to navigate emotional pressure. They're taught to fix problems, not sit with feelings. So when love puts him in unfamiliar territory, he retreats into thought instead of expression. He pulls back to process, not to punish you. He creates space to understand himself, not to push you away. That internal conflict shows up as mixed signals. He checks on you but doesn't open up. He shows care but avoids deep conversations. He stays connected but hesitates to define things. To you, it feels confusing. To him, it feels like survival. He's trying to protect something he values without ruining it through emotional immaturity. And here's what matters most. Confusion paired with effort is different from confusion paired with neglect. A man who truly loves you may struggle, but he won't disappear. He'll still show concern. He'll still respect you. He'll still circle back. His confusion doesn't erase his sense of responsibility toward you. What you're witnessing isn't a lack of love. It's a man adjusting to the reality that love requires more from him than he expected. He's realizing that to love you properly, he has to grow, and growth is uncomfortable. Growth challenges old habits. Growth exposes insecurities. So when his actions don't always make sense, understand that love doesn't always present itself as certainty at first. Sometimes love shows up as hesitation, overthinking, and emotional self-examination. That confusion is often the space where transformation is happening, even if it doesn't look graceful from the outside. Let me break something down that most people misunderstand. When a man truly loves you, it doesn't automatically make him confident or secure. In fact, sometimes it does the opposite. Love has a way of exposing the parts of a man he's been avoiding. It brings his fears to the surface, his insecurities into the light, and his doubts into his thoughts. And when that happens, his behavior can start to feel confusing, even though his feelings are real. A man who doesn't love you moves without hesitation. He does what feels good in the moment and thinks about the consequences later, if at all. But a man who truly loves you becomes aware of consequences immediately. He starts thinking about how his actions affect you, how his words might be interpreted, and how his presence or absence could impact your emotions. That awareness creates pressure, and pressure creates hesitation. You might notice that he overthinks simple things. He rereads messages before sending them. He pauses before responding. He becomes quieter than usual, not because he's losing interest, but because he's trying not to mess things up. Loving you suddenly feels important, and when something feels important, fear of doing it wrong shows up. Love also forces a man to confront his readiness. He may realize he cares about you more than he expected, more than he planned for, more than he prepared himself for, and that realization can be overwhelming. Inside his mind, there's a constant back and forth between desire and doubt. He wants to move closer, but he questions whether he's ready for what that closeness demands. This internal struggle can make him inconsistent. One moment he's emotionally present, open and warm. The next moment he's distant, guarded and unsure. To you, it feels like mixed signals. To him, it feels like emotional overload. He's not pulling away because he doesn't care. He's pulling back because he's trying to regain balance. Men are often taught to suppress emotions rather than understand them. So when love brings emotions he can't easily label or control, confusion becomes his default response. Instead of talking through what he feels, he retreats inward, he thinks. He analyzes. He tries to make sense of emotions he was never taught how to navigate. Another thing that creates confusion is the fear of vulnerability. Loving you means opening himself up to being seen fully, including his flaws. It means risking rejection, disappointment, or failure. And vulnerability is uncomfortable for many men, so sometimes he chooses distance as a form of protection, not from you, but from his own fear. He may still show care in small ways. He checks in, he notices when something's off, he supports you quietly rather than loudly. These actions matter, even when his words aren't clear. They reveal that his confusion doesn't erase his concern. It simply shapes how he expresses it. People often assume that clarity equals love and confusion equals disinterest. But that's not always true. Sometimes clarity comes later, after the emotional dust settles. Sometimes confusion is the process of a man realizing that loving you requires him to change. And change is uncomfortable before it becomes empowering. When love challenges a man to grow, it disrupts his routine. It makes him question his habits, his priorities, and his future. That disruption doesn't happen smoothly. It creates pauses, hesitations, and moments of emotional retreat. Those moments can be confusing to witness, but they are often signs that something real is happening beneath the surface. So when his actions don't always align perfectly, understand that real love isn't always clean or predictable. Sometimes it shows up as emotional turbulence, inner conflict, and slow self-awareness. That confusion isn't always a red flag. Sometimes it's the sound of a man learning how to love in a deeper, more responsible way. Let me tell you something important about love that doesn't get talked about enough. When a man truly loves you, it doesn't always bring instant clarity. Sometimes it brings emotional conflict. Love has a way of interrupting a man's sense of control. It forces him to feel things he didn't plan to feel and face questions he wasn't ready to answer. And when that happens, his behavior can start to feel confusing, even though the feelings underneath are genuine. A man who isn't emotionally invested moves with ease. He doesn't think too much, doesn't worry too much, and doesn't hesitate too much. But a man who truly loves you becomes aware of what's at stake. He starts weighing his actions, measuring his words and reconsidering his choices. That awareness slows him down. It makes him cautious. And to the outside world, caution often looks like uncertainty. You might notice that he becomes less expressive than before, not because he feels less, but because he feels more. Love adds pressure. It adds responsibility. Suddenly, he's not just thinking about what he wants, but how his actions affect you. And when a man feels that kind of responsibility, he doesn't move recklessly. He pauses. Another thing that creates confusion is the internal shift love causes. Loving you means he has to consider a future that includes you. That realization can be overwhelming. It brings up questions about readiness, stability, and commitment. He might not have clear answers yet, but the questions themselves create emotional tension. That tension shows up as hesitation, distance, or mixed signals. Men are often raised to be problem solvers, not emotional processors. So when love presents feelings that can't be fixed or controlled, he doesn't know what to do with them. Instead of talking it through, he thinks it through. Instead of expressing, he withdraws. That withdrawal isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's self-protection while he sorts through emotions he doesn't fully understand yet. You may see moments where he's warm, attentive, and connected, followed by moments where he seems distant or distracted. That inconsistency can be painful to experience, but often it reflects an internal struggle rather than a lack of care. He's trying to balance his desire for you with his fear of failing you. Fear plays a bigger role in love than people admit. Fear of not being enough. Fear of disappointing you. Fear of losing himself in the process of loving someone else. When those fears rise, they don't always come out as words. They come out as silence, space, and confusion. A man who truly loves you doesn't want to rush into something he can't sustain. He understands, even if subconsciously, that love isn't just about passion, it's about endurance. So instead of making promises he's unsure he can keep, he holds back. Instead of moving fast, he moves carefully. And that carefulness can be misinterpreted as uncertainty. What matters is not whether he feels confused, but how he treats you while he's confused. Love doesn't disappear during uncertainty. It shows up in respect, consideration, and continued presence. Even when he's unsure of himself, a man in love still wants to protect what he cares about. So when his actions feel inconsistent, remember that love isn't always immediate clarity. Sometimes love is the process of a man growing into the version of himself that's capable of loving you the right way. That process can look messy, slow, and emotionally complex, but it often begins with confusion before it becomes understanding. Let me tell you why this part of love feels so confusing, because when a man truly loves you, it doesn't just affect his heart, it affects his entire sense of direction. Love interrupts his comfort zone. It forces him to reconsider the way he's been living, the choices he's been making, and the future he thought he had figured out. And when something powerful enough to change a man's life shows up, confusion is often the first reaction. A man who isn't emotionally invested moves freely. He follows impulse. He says what sounds good. He does what benefits him in the moment. But a man who truly loves you becomes aware that his actions carry weight. He starts realizing that what he does can either protect you or hurt you. That realization slows him down. It makes him cautious, thoughtful, and sometimes unsure of how to move forward without causing damage. One of the biggest reasons love creates confusion is because it exposes a man's unfinished growth. Loving you means he has to rise to a level he may not be fully ready for yet. It forces him to face his emotional gaps, his communication struggles, and his fears around commitment. And when a man sees clearly what's required of him, but isn't sure he can deliver it yet, his behavior becomes inconsistent. He may feel deeply connected to you one moment and emotionally overwhelmed the next. That doesn't mean his feelings are fading. It means he's processing the pressure of becoming someone better. Growth is uncomfortable. Growth challenges old habits and old mindsets. And during that challenge, confusion is part of the process. Another layer people don't talk about is the fear of vulnerability. Loving you means being seen fully, without the mask. It means risking rejection, disappointment, or failure. For many men, vulnerability feels dangerous because they were taught to be strong, not exposed. So when love demands emotional openness, his instinct may be to retreat instead of reveal. This retreat doesn't always mean distance from you. Sometimes it means distance from the moment. He goes quiet to think. He creates space to regain emotional balance. He slows down because he doesn't want to rush into something he can't sustain. To you, that space feels like confusion. To him, it feels like self-preservation. There's also the fear of loss that comes with real love. When a man truly loves you, he becomes aware of how much you matter to him. And when something matters deeply, the possibility of losing it becomes frightening. That fear can make him hesitant, careful, and overly cautious. He may overthink situations, second-guess his words, and hesitate to make big moves because he doesn't want to ruin what he values. Men often struggle with emotional expression, not because they don't feel, but because they don't know how to translate feelings into words. So instead of explaining what's happening inside him, he shows it through behavior that feels inconsistent. One day he's attentive and warm. The next day he's distant and quiet. That shift isn't manipulation. It's emotional overload. A man who doesn't love you won't go through this internal battle. He won't think this deeply. He won't question himself this much. He won't worry about the long-term impact of his actions. Confusion requires care. It requires emotional investment. Indifference is simple. Love is complex. What's important to understand is that confusion does not cancel responsibility. Even while struggling internally, a man who truly loves you will still try to protect your feelings. He won't intentionally disrespect you. He won't completely disappear. He may stumble, but he won't detach completely. His confusion exists alongside his concern. Love also challenges a man's sense of independence. Being with you means considering someone else in his decisions. It means compromise. It means sacrifice. And when a man has been operating independently for a long time, that adjustment doesn't happen overnight. The mental shift takes time, and during that time, uncertainty shows up. People often mistake emotional clarity as the starting point of love, when in reality, clarity often comes later. Love starts with emotion, then confusion, then understanding. It's a process, not a switch. And in that process, a man may seem unsure, conflicted, or hesitant even though his feelings are genuine. So when his behavior feels hard to read, understand that real love isn't always smooth or predictable. Sometimes it shows up as inner conflict, emotional hesitation, and slow transformation. That confusion isn't always a sign of weakness. Sometimes it's evidence that something real deep and life-changing is taking place inside him. Let me explain the final piece of this, because this is where understanding changes everything. When a man truly loves you, his emotions don't just sit quietly in his heart. They create movement, pressure, and inner conversation. Love makes him question parts of himself he never questioned before. It makes him reflect on his past, his mistakes, and his readiness for the future. And when those thoughts collide, confusion is often the result. A man who is not emotionally invested doesn't struggle like this. He keeps things surface level. He avoids depth. He doesn't lose sleep thinking about how his actions affect someone else. But when love is real, it demands attention. It forces a man to think beyond the moment and consider the long-term impact of his choices. That shift in thinking can be overwhelming, especially if he hasn't fully matured emotionally. Love also highlights a man's sense of purpose. When he cares deeply about you, he starts asking himself whether he's in the right place in life to love you properly. He wonders if he can provide stability, consistency, and emotional safety. Those questions don't always come with immediate answers. And when a man doesn't have answers, he slows down, he becomes cautious, he hesitates. This hesitation can look like mixed signals. He may be present one day and distant the next. He may express affection but struggle with commitment. That inconsistency isn't always intentional. It's often the result of a man trying to align his emotions with his reality. He wants to love you fully, but he's still figuring out how to become the man who can do that without falling short. Another reason confusion appears is because love challenges a man's ego. Loving you means admitting that you matter enough to influence his decisions. It means letting go of control. For someone who has been used to leading with certainty, that loss of control can feel uncomfortable. So instead of moving forward confidently, he pauses to regain emotional balance. Men are rarely taught how to communicate emotional uncertainty. They're taught to be decisive, strong, and sure. So when love puts them in a space of uncertainty, they don't know how to express it. Instead of explaining, they withdraw. Instead of opening up, they think silently. That silence can be painful for you, but it often has nothing to do with a lack of love. There's also the fear of repeating past mistakes. A man who truly loves you doesn't want to bring old patterns into something new. He may be reflecting on past relationships, regrets, and lessons learned. That reflection takes time. It causes pauses. It creates moments where he steps back to ensure he doesn't hurt you the way he or others have been hurt before. Love makes a man more aware of his flaws. When he cares deeply, he starts seeing where he falls short. That self-awareness can shake his confidence. He may worry about not being enough, not doing enough, or not showing up the right way. Those worries don't always turn into words. They turn into hesitation and emotional distance. What matters is that confusion rooted in love still carries intention. A man who truly loves you may struggle internally, but he won't stop caring. He won't stop being aware of your presence in his life. Even when he pulls back emotionally, you're still in his thoughts. His confusion isn't absence, it's processing. People often believe love should feel instantly safe and certain. But real love, especially for someone who hasn't experienced it deeply before, can feel disruptive before it feels secure. It challenges comfort. It demands growth. And growth doesn't happen without uncertainty. So when you see a man acting unsure, slow, or conflicted, understand that love isn't always clarity in the beginning. Sometimes love is a man standing at the edge of change, trying to gather the courage to step forward. That moment of confusion is not the end of love. It's often the space where love is becoming real.